Okay, well, welcome everyone to the American Cetacean Society San Francisco Bay Chapter's first speaker event of 2024. I'm Susan Hopp, board member responsible for our speaker program, and with me is fellow board member Wade Cobb. And on behalf of the entire ACS chapter board, we wish you all a happy new year. And as a note, we're looking at some exciting ways to further our engagement with our community in 2024. So more on that to come in the days ahead. All right, so for anyone new to the American Cetacean Society, we are a chapter within a national organization that is the oldest nonprofit dedicated to the protection of whales, dolphins, porpoises, and their habitat. And we do this through education, community engagement, and awarding grants towards cetacean research. We certainly appreciate your donations in support of our mission. They fund our research grant to scientists. And I might add, we will be hearing from one of our grantees on her research later this year for one of our talks. It's easy to donate on our website if you haven't at time of registration. So thank you again. Now, tonight we're recording this session, and please put your questions in the Q&A. That is better than the chat. And after the presentation, we'll do our best to get to them. So for our subject at hand. So starting off a new year is significant. And when planning started for this first talk of the year, our speaker tonight was our first choice. I think we can all agree we're at a crucial juncture for our oceans, really for all life, including humanity. One just has to read the IPCC reports to know the challenges we face and the changes underway. So who better than Dr. Jeff Boehm, who has been at the helm of the Marine Mammal Center for the last 15 plus years, to give us a front row seat from the perspective of marine mammal health. Jeff's talk, fittingly, is titled Behind the Bark: What Noisy California Sea Lions and Other Marine Mammals Can Tell Us About the State of Our Ocean. So first, a little bit about Jeff. He traces his career path back to a volunteer position he held at the Marine Mammal Center as a young adult. He returned to the center as executive director in 2008 and has since expanded the organization's efforts to advance global ocean conservation through marine mammal rescue and rehabilitation, scientific research, and education. As Chief External Relations Officer, Jeff plays a critical role in shaping the organization's brand, partnerships, and revenue generation for even greater impact. Previously, Jeff served as the Senior VP of Animal Health and Conservation Science at the John G. Shedd Aquarium in Chicago, where he worked for 16 years. There, he oversaw the veterinary medical program and led and coordinated the aquarium's conservation science division, including partnerships, educational, and advocacy programs. Jeff's awards for his work include the 2019 Ocean Hero Award from the International Ocean Film Festival, the 2021 American Veterinary Medical Association Animal Welfare Award, and the UC Davis 2022 Alumni Achievement Award. Jeff received his bachelor's degree from University of California at San Diego and his veterinary medical degree from the University of California at Davis. He's a founding member of the American College of Animal Welfare and served as its president in 2019. Jeff lives in Mill Valley with his partner, 2 children, and an ever-changing menagerie of animals. Jeff, thank you so much for being here and kicking off our 2024 program, and handing it over to you.
Fantastic. Susan, thank you very much. Wade, appreciate it. Real pleasure to be here, to be part of you kicking off your sessions for 2024. I was joking with Susan as we were chatting before this started that sadly, the menagerie is down to just 2 cats now. The bees are gone, the chickens are gone. We've got to be stocking up, I think, if I'm going to keep that in my bio. I wish I could see the folks in this virtual room. It's a very different experience to give a presentation, seeing yourself in your computer screen, and boy, it lacks that collegiality, that sense of community that you have when you're all together under one roof. I've put a couple of pacing slides into this presentation to pause, to invite all of you to virtually raise your hands, to go off mic, do whatever Wade and Susan will let you do, but just to offer some opportunity for some dialogue during the presentation. And of course, happy to and want to be around for questions at the end. It is January. I'm still finding myself saying Happy New Year to folks on emails as I sign off. And got to tell you, just as Susan opened up, boy, there's a lot of woe out there and a lot of heaviness. We just saw yesterday or the day before marked the anniversary of the shooting down in Half Moon Bay. And if you look at local or national politics or international politics or the state of the environment, I've found myself over these past several weeks thinking, what more can I do? What more can I do? I've got to be doing more. I can't just sit back and let these things I'm witnessing happen. And I've had I'm privileged and fortunate to be surrounded by people wiser than me who will take me aside and say, well, no, wait a minute. No. Focus on what you do well. Focus on where you know you can spend your time with impact, and realize that you're not going to do a fraction of those things that your mental drop down list suggests you should. Be okay with that. And I kind of distilled that down to this phrase of finding one's power and potency. Power not in the physical strength manner, but in the skills, the attributes, those things that you are uniquely good at, right? And potency, put those against things that matter, and find a way to take the good stuff you bring into the world and put it towards those thorny issues that you can make a difference with. And for me, that's kind of a nice January kind of warm up. And I'll leave it to you to think about, but I think there's a parallel, and I'll come back to this at the end, between where my head is at, me on the couch with you now, but also with where this organization is. And I'll have more to say on that as we move through. Okay, Susan, this is where you tell me if the numbers are dropping when they look at that photo in this image. I
Okay, I think
I
so.
I offer this slide as a full disclosure, as a means of conveying to you the arc of my career, philosophically and otherwise, and as an example of one of the most humbling, if not humiliating, experiences of my nascent career. That is, in fact, me next to a walrus that we had named Flo, a Pacific walrus. This is in San Diego in the 80s. If you were at SeaWorld during those years, you'll remember the Spooky Kooky Castle. That was where the seal and otter show was. I was uh, detained in purgatory of sorts at SeaWorld while I was knocking on the door of UC Davis trying to get in. I had gone to school at UC San Diego, as Susan mentioned, got a job at SeaWorld, having had a lot of animal experience prior to that. And because I had focused on so much more of the experience than the coursework, my GPA was just not getting the attention of the faculty up at Davis. So 3 years at SeaWorld, arrive in my first year at UC Davis, proud of what I had been doing. A classmate comes into one of our labs one day holding this magazine, Discover magazine from December 1986. And he's like, Jeff, pretty proud of that illustrious career of yours down at SeaWorld, are you? And flips open the page. If you look here, I don't know if you can read that well, but the focus is it right to keep dolphins in captivity? Was one of the subtitles of the magazine. There was a 2-page spread, 1 page on dolphins, 1 page on zoos and aquariums. And there was one photo on the side about zoos and aquariums, and it was me in a picture not unlike the one that you see here. And the caption below it was, "Hokey skits like this do nothing to educate the public." And I was pierced. I was deflated. And yet, when I look back, what a remarkable uh, foreshadowing of societal views of a lot in the world of marine mammal consideration from a social and public perspective. I did go on to work in the zoo and aquarium community, and now I sit in an organization I'm most proud of that is about wildlife and about ocean conservation. But it's been an interesting career to say the least. I have evolved, as Susan said, from a CEO role that I moved into when I moved back here in 2008 to now one that is around external relations. And the point of that role is to take the aggregate almost 50 years of work that the Marine Mammal Center has been undertaking, 50 years of experience, and bundle that up and get it out into forums where it matters. That could be telling our story in a working group here with the Harbor Safety Committee in San Francisco, around San Francisco Bay. It can be ponying up our data so that those who regulate the fishing community can decide whether the Dungeness crab fishery is open early or late based on the presence or absence of whales. It can be offering opinion on policy or legislation, or identifying and calling out that nexus between the good work the Marine Mammal Center does and where there are federal or state or county priorities, and allowing that public funding to come in to support our work. I love telling the story of the Marine Mammal Center, and telling it for impact, as this role now allows me to do, is something I feel really privileged to do. We are heading up to 50 years, and I want to take you through 3 slides that give you a bit of a timeline of things that have gone on here at the Marine Mammal Center, but things that have gone on contemporaneously here in the Bay Area and elsewhere. All right, so this is a 10-year period, 1965 to 1975. I'll remind you that we opened in 75. This would be embarrassing if I got this part wrong. This was remarkable. A good colleague and good friend, part of the Marine Mammal Center then and now, Bill Keener, instructed me of this. That's just stunning to me. Last whaling station in the U.S. The 1970s were just like this this wonderful cauldron of environmentalism from a legislative and behavior point of view. The Marine Mammal Protection Act in 1972, the Endangered Species Act in 1973. In 1975, the birth of the not Marine Mammal Center, but the California Marine Mammal Center, right here in the very site that we're on. We were chatting a little bit in the warm up to this, and want to make clear that if you have not been to see us, I have my email address at the end of this presentation. Please give me a shout. It would be my pleasure to invite you out. We're out here in the Headlands. I'm guessing most of you have been here or are aware of our work in some intimate way. I'm guessing there's volunteers and or even employees among those listening. But if you're not one of them, please do give us a shout. Herman was that first sea lion patient way back then. So that just that period, so much changed, so much shifted, so much was kind of set us on a trajectory for a lot of the work that has followed. Another time frame here, the full 50 years. We opened back in 75. First scientific paper was published in 1979. Humphrey entered San Francisco Bay. I know some of you remember Humphrey. Very celebrated whale who hung out in the bay, in the mudflats, south part of San Francisco Bay, far too long. California sea lions showed up at Pier 39, 1989, same time as the Loma Prieta earthquake. No connection. A lot of people try to make a connection. I don't believe there is one. First case of domoic acid toxicosis back in 1998 was diagnosed here. Our sister satellite facilities down in Monterey, called Monterey Bay operations, and San Luis Obispo operations down south, opened up in 2005. We renovated this facility it was about time in 2009, opening up a new state-of-the-art hospital and visitor center. Our hospital in Hawaii for the endangered Hawaiian monk seal opened in 2014. 2015 saw an extraordinary unusual mortality event actually with California sea lions where some 1,800 patients came into this organization alone. And we launched our cetacean field program back in 2020. All right, one more of these timeline things and I'll stop. So if I were to kind of bucket up what the 5 decades of the Marine Mammal Center have been about, I'd put it this way. We opened, we were about rehabilitation, release, and public education. Get them in, get them well, get them out, kind of full stop. I'm simplifying. There was science occurring, but it was really just about the animals, their well-being, getting them in, getting them out. We built on that in the next decade from rehabilitation to research in earnest is the way I put it. There was at that time that the center hired Francis Gulland, well known to many of you, I'm sure, and at the time the first PhD DVM that the Marine Mammal Center had hired, and she stepped back and said, "Holy smokes, there's an awful lot that's being prompted here from a research point of view. Let's get our game together, let's get our act together, and get on with the hard work and the important work of describing what it is that we're seeing and getting that into the literature, and really shifted this organization's focus and I think set the gold standard for the community of marine mammal rehab." And in fact, that led to us emerging as a center of significant scientific influence. The study of domoic acid was a shining example of that. The next decade, 2005, 2015, we opened this facility in Sausalito, opened the facility in Kona, and continued to strengthen what had then become an international training program. And here we are, 2015 to 2025, and it's really rolled up into that building out of some of our programs, but also a valuing and a presentation of the information that we do have, getting it out of the file cabinets, getting off the dusty shelves, and getting it into the rooms where the discussions are happening, where we should be active. This is who we are in glossy photos, just a few of them. We are an ocean conservation organization and we do our work through individual animals. And that's a pretty special lane to be in. There's a lot of organizations that do work with individual animals. There's a lot of organizations that do ocean and or terrestrial conservation. There are fewer organizations that do both. And it's a pretty daunting but phenomenal opportunity to be in that role. We're the largest marine mammal teaching hospital in the world. It sounds like one of these hyperbolic statements or superlatives that you have to really try to find to build the words to be able to say it and keep it a straight face, right? But in fact, we are. And the volume of patients that comes into our facility each and every year is what really hits that mark. There's nowhere one could go on the planet if one wanted to study and be immersed in marine mammal rehabilitation work where one would see more patients than at the Marine Mammal Center here in Sausalito. And at the end of the day, all of that work is absolutely about each and every individual animal, like this little sea lion, bright-eyed looking at us, but it's also about that ocean that is that animal's home. All right, so this is that first slide that tells me just to pipe down for a moment, see if there are questions that are coming into the chat from Susan and or Wade, or to allow anyone to shout out a question. And suddenly it's automated. Didn't know that was going to happen. Do we see any questions there, Susan?
I think we're good. We're good to continue.
Cool. Little more into the weeds on how it is we do our work, where we do our work. We're based here in California. Those light blue counties from Mendocino County on the north all the way down through southern San Luis Obispo County, and all the counties that ring the bay That's our responsibility under the authorization of NOAA Fisheries. Marine mammals are federally protected animals. Not just anyone can go out and do anything with them, but we are authorized to mount rescue operations for them. We operate here. We operate in Hawaii with a facility on the Big Island of Hawaii with physical presence on both Maui and Hawaii, but responding to animals that are either brought to us or that we go to throughout the whole 1,000-mile archipelago of the Hawaiian Islands. We're a nonprofit organization. We have about 130 staff and more than 1,400 volunteers. I would love to, I don't know how we would do this with paper records that don't exist anymore, go back and find out what the number is of volunteers that we have had in our 50 years. It's just got to be a stunning number. I do know, just because I run into them in the grocery store, there's an awful lot of alums out there. And pitch, we're always looking for more volunteers. Okay, so the work breaks up into response and rescue. Not every animal that we respond to wants to be rescued. Most don't want to be rescued, but not all of them need rescuing either. So sometimes we're just going out and assessing animals and putting them on a watch list. Other times we absolutely need to bring them in. You'll see one of our volunteers, Sue, there with the net, another volunteer or two with boards that we use to ensure that we're safely getting access to these animals that, no joke, do not want to be rescued and still have a fight in them usually. We are on land for many of our pinnipeds. More and more, we're building out a program for whale and dolphin work, so we're out on the water as well, oftentimes in pursuit of animals that are entangled in that case. Once we get them in, it's about getting them well, giving them a break, allowing them to stabilize over an evening, doing an entry physical exam, doing all the diagnostics literally that you or I would have if we walked into a medical clinic. We have the laboratory on site to do the complete blood counts, the serum chemistry profiles, et cetera, advanced diagnostics for ultrasound, endoscopy, EEGs, et cetera, radiographs. And the animals are housed. Their hospital beds are in the lower part of that picture. You can see some animals resting on the lip of a pool. There's some 55 different holding areas for patients, not all of them as grand as a pool as you're looking at there. Water that's circulated and filtered and disinfected, some 220,000 gallons of fresh water that we had brine to bring it up to an appropriate salinity. These animals are hungry, and we can have as much as 10,000 pounds of food moved through in a year, fresh frozen food that gets sorted, bucketed up, and fed out to the animals. One of the things that I enjoy about the Marine Mammal Center is if you see a picture like this, you cannot tell who's a volunteer and who's a staff member. It's one team at the end of the day, and an awful lot of really sophisticated roles are available to folks who may be an accountant by day, and they are a marine mammal caretaker by night. This is what it's all about at its core. This is the release of animals. This looks like a very familiar beach to me down in Pebble Beach. These little harbor seals going back out into the ocean. A really moving experience to witness one of these releases. You may have encountered one just by chance because they're happening all season long from late spring into the fall, up and down our coast. And every one of those little guys, there's 6 of them there, I think, that are heading out, represents tens of hundreds of hours of care by hundreds of people, is the embodiment of all the technological advancements, the scientific advancements, the medical advancements that have allowed us to really hone our medical care of them. Very moving experience. Another call for questions if you have them. This, I believe, is Bumblebee. Bumblebee was notorious for, I can't remember what number, but it was like a marquee number of harbor seal patients that we had seen, and it's just a gratuitous, cute photo to share with you while I queue up any questions that might be coming in. Anything?
We do have a couple
Yeah,
if you're ready for them.
sure. What?
Um, so number one, we have one kind of on the volunteering side. How old do volunteers have to be? Is there a minimum age?
Yeah, standardly it's 18, and we ask for a 1 year commitment. Both of those things might be disappointing for a youngster out there or for someone who doesn't want to commit a year. But I didn't encourage you to investigate by coming into one of our introductory meetings to learn what the roles are, what the requirements really feel like over a year's time. But 18 standardly, we do have a youth volunteer program that accepts high school students in. That's a very kind of curated, managed program, competitive as all get out, but that is a way for youngsters to come in.
Makes sense. And then another kind of on that train of thought is how did you discover the Marine Mammal Center after you graduated from UC Davis?
Yeah, so it wasn't then. It was I had left there. I grew up in San Rafael nearby and went to UC San Diego, came up on a break from school, had worked in veterinary clinics in San Rafael and San Anselmo, um, as paid jobs while in high school and on summer and winter breaks. And one of my friends there said, "Hey, we got to go check this place out." I had never been here. I had never seen veterinarians working in that capacity. My limited youthful imagination did not conjure up the role of veterinarians working with wildlife, and so I was just floored. And it's been in my blood ever since.
Makes sense. Um, and then another on, I guess, kind of the different organizations. Somebody asked if you could kind of briefly go over, I guess, the difference in kind of the initiatives between MMC, SLO, the Pacific Marine Center, and Laguna Beach,
Yeah.
SeaWorld. Kind of, are there different, missions that each has, or if you have any way that I guess people could remember them by?
Yeah, it's kind of an alphabet soup, and it is easiest to say that they're all working largely under the same mission. There are more than a dozen organizations like ours in the state of California. And I think on a list as many as 120, or I know it is more nationally. Again, all authorized to do our work by NOAA Fisheries. The MBO and SLO acronyms that I used are for satellite facilities of ours. So they are under the Marine Mammal Center, part of the Marine Mammal Center, but those are best described as response, stabilization, transportation hubs. They see the lion's share of our patients just because of that geography around Monterey Bay and south, but the animals are coming in en route to the hospital up here in Sausalito. You mentioned Pacific Marine Mammal Center. There's Marine Mammal Care Center, Los Angeles. There's San Diego SeaWorld. There's Channel Islands Marine Wildlife Institute. There's a whole array of organizations that are good friends and colleagues of ours who are doing very similar work.
Makes sense. Um, and then so kind of on the regulatory side of things, since you've been with MMC, is there any regulations that have kind of evolved like with you guys or for you guys as far as like the rescue and rehab operations over the years?
I wouldn't say it's changed by and large over these past 15 years. There has certainly been some minor changes, but the the work evolves, the technologies evolve, the standards of care evolve. There's peer review, there's review by NOAA Fisheries staff that keeps us sharp, keeps us on our toes, keeps us making sure that we're doing the very best that we can. We're more and more inclined to focus on um, broader topics than just animal care. So data management is an enormous issue now, and trying to coordinate with federal agencies how we best and most efficiently get the good data that we're amassing into a system where it can be used for broad applications. So that's new. I'm gonna
Makes
tell you what,
sense.
I'm gonna dive back in for a bit and come back to you, Wade, if that works.
Sounds great.
Cool. All right. Okay, all of that work around animal care is, in fact, point I just made, the machine that generates the data that then is what we use to drive the research that becomes the stories that we tell for impact. And these three images are pretty illustrative of that. In the upper left, if you're seeing it the same way I am, this is a team with San Francisco across the bay from Angel Island, I'm inferring, that is part of a necropsy team to ascertain why an animal has died in San Francisco Bay. No mean feat, right? You need to, typically, you don't find the animal on Angel Island, so you need to find the animal, get it towed to Angel Island, deploy a team that can spend 12 to 14 hours out there amongst shifting tides, getting standardized measures, samples into our care that to then put together a working diagnosis based on a gross necropsy, to then hand those tissues off to our pathologist to do the microscopic analysis to determine a more complete holistic histopathologic diagnosis, to tell the story of whether this animal died of malnutrition, whether it was a ship strike, whether it was an infectious disease, etc. A lot of science embedded in what I just described. This little guy down below is wearing wearing a satellite tag. Not all of our patients do wear a satellite tag. You see a little orange tag on his flipper there? That is a passive piece of plastic that has an alphanumeric designation on it, used to determine who that patient was and to track it over time. Now, that's a pretty durable item that will stay with that animal likely. Doesn't tell you a lot of information though. It tells you A and B. You dropped him off at point A, and then many years later you see him again at point B. Unlike the satellite tag that is on the back that can give us all kinds of information on location, on dive times, on dive depths, on temperature, and the like. Those are expensive though. It's about $2,500 to $3,500 each to deploy them. So we deploy them on patients where we really have a burning curiosity as to how that animal is doing over time. So it's a real small fraction of the patients that we have. That clock in that photo is getting my attention because I'm trying to find a clock on my computer to see what time it is. All right. This is Carlos, our laboratory manager, doing what looks to be a complete blood count. All of that routine data gets amassed as well. So all of that is part of this voluminous data set. You couple that with the fact that when we do a necropsy, like we're doing on that whale or a sea lion or a seal, those tissues are put into a frozen tissue bank as well. That's all just research gold that's waiting to be mined. A really, really significant contribution to the field in that regard. We're teachers as well. So long ago in the 70s, we began talking about what we were doing, talking about the environment, trying to get kids to light up about the environment. We now have more significant and robust and sustained programs like Ocean Ambassadors, which is a year-long program for middle schoolers where the class teacher is brought in August and given a couple of days of professional development, because the way schools are sometimes, it might be the music teacher who's told, yeah, and you got to teach that science class as well. So they're not always really confident with the material. We give them a program where they can get professional development themselves, get online curricula that they can share with the students. The students are taken out on a couple of field trips on the bay and to the beach. They're brought out here to the Marine Mammal Center. We've got a program that is attractive to donors, so we can afford to provide buses, which is a terribly expensive thing for schools with field trips. And we're actually also able to pay the substitute teacher for that teacher who's needs to be backfilled. So it's a beautiful program for what it brings the students, for what it brings the teachers, for what it brings the school systems as well. That's Ocean Ambassadors. We've got the Youth Crew, which I mentioned a couple of moments ago, which is an on-ramp for young adults in high school who have a passion for this kind of work. This is more information than you need, but it's an image of a job posting amongst a couple of organizations, ourselves included, in the Oiled Wildlife Care Network, I believe. No, I've got the wrong one in mind. Oh yeah, Oil Wildlife Care Network. Internships to draw individuals from marginalized communities who haven't been a part of this community into our work. And then we are a teaching hospital. And at the end of the day, if we can be putting out and seeding the planet with more competent and charged up and on fire veterinarians and biologists and PhD scientists who want to advance the care of marine mammals, that's what we see as education. So it's not just field trip education, nor is it just professional training. It's everything in between, and general public education as well. Okay. This is a long list, and this is going to be like a sampler plate. I'm not going to dive deep on any of this stuff. And for any one of these topics, there's 1, 2, or 3 individuals here at the Marine Mammal Center who I'd rather tap to tell you the deep story, but I can tell you the general story. And we're fond of asking these 3 questions when we talk about things like this. What are you talking about? Why are you talking about it? And what do I do with the information that you've told me? What, so what, and now what? For these: domoic acid toxicosis, sea lion cancer, Hawaiian monk seal conservation, infectious diseases, cetacean field work, climate change, behavior change, and environmental enrichment. All right, domoic acid. You've heard of harmful algal blooms, doubtless. They're not all the same, right? There's different species of algae, different toxins that are elaborated. On our coast, one of the ones that we have is an algae that produces a toxin that is called domoic acid. Domoic acid, in this very dastardly way, is a mimic of a natural neurotransmitter. So what it does, neurotransmitter is like a chemical that is telling a nerve to fire. It does that relentlessly until that nerve fatigues and dies. And so domoic acid can cause death of neural tissue. Acutely, it causes seizures in animals. More chronically, it causes wasting of neural tissue. So there's images, there's a satellite enhanced image of an algal bloom on the left. There's our little domoic acid and pseudonychia, the algae in the center. And here is a couple of cross sections of the brain. So it's a brain cut. So one side is shown against the opposite side. This little area, I don't know if you can see my cursor. This little kind of S-shaped part of the brain. Can you see that?
Yes.
Excellent. It's called the hippocampus. Look at the difference in this one. Wasted away, right? So you're seeing a normal hippocampus and a wasted one. This is one that has been exposed to domoic acid. Hippocampus is a place of memory, mental mapping, etc. These animals who are chronically affected, we cannot responsibly release them to the wild, and those animals are euthanized. If we get this in an acute phase, we can provide fluid therapy to the animal, anti-seizure medications, and generally bring them through it as that toxin moves through their system. This is a scary one. California sea lion cancer. We used to talk about 3 wildlife species being described as having cancer clusters. One was the beluga up in the St. Lawrence Seaway. The other was the Tasmanian devil down in the southern hemisphere. And off the west coast of North America, the California sea lion. We have recognized this here at the Marine Mammal Center for a couple of decades now. And very sadly, it's something that presents to us almost exclusively as a chronic condition where the animals are wasted, where they're maybe manifesting something superficially as another disease, but then when you get them in hand, you realize, oh no, this animal is really here because it is wasting from what is a metastatic cancer situation. In males and females, urogenital carcinoma And we have found and studied and identified that there is a correlation with legacy chemicals, PCBs, DDTs in these animal systems. There's also another cofactor of a herpes virus in these animals. So if it weren't so terrible, it would be fascinating to have this laboratory off our coast of cancer in wildlife. And in fact, it has the attention of veterinary oncologists as well as MD oncologists looking over our shoulders, trying to understand what's going on there in more detail. Hawaiian monk seals. Most all the animals that we take care of at the Marine Mammal Center are not from endangered populations. We do have some animals like stellar sea lions that have been classified in different ways over the years because their numbers have been low. We have the fur seals, Guadalupe and northern fur seals, whose numbers have been threatened. Hawaiian monk seals are extraordinarily endangered, and it was in the 90s that we became invited into discussions. It was this staff member, Francis, whom I referenced earlier, who was front and center in those discussions. And it was concurrent eventually with us building this hospital here. And she was watching in the islands as federal and state and other NGO and academic biologists were sitting around in annual meetings talking about the Hawaiian monk seals and their numbers diving down into the low 1,000s, approaching only 900 or so animals, and not having any dedicated space to care for pups that were malnourished, that needed care, et cetera. And she was like, we know how to do this. We can build a hospital. And we've got, at that time, we had some, 35 years or so of really significant experience with hundreds of patients from other species that gave us the experience level to go into Hawaii to build a hospital in Kona to be able to care for these animals. And it's been a really satisfying experience to be able to be a part of the animals' care and their conservation. The threats that they're seeing, like so many, tend to have our fingerprints on them. And so being a part of unraveling those is really gratifying. We see infectious diseases in patients. Lepto, toxo, sarco, talk you through those briefly. Leptospirosis might be a word that's familiar to you if you have a dog. When you're getting a DHLP vaccine, that L in that long list of pathogens that you're vaccinating for is leptospirosis. It's a very common pathogen in humans as well. Has a real predilection for kidney tissue. And this is a kidney from pathology here on the left that is significantly infected. And the animals come into us in a classic position with their flippers often tucked underneath their bellies. You get the impression, we can't know this, but you get the impression that just the discomfort, the abdominal pain that they're experiencing is such that gives them some relief. We'll also see an animal with its nose on a beach, almost trying to get the water from the sand, which is salt water, not a great answer to its needs, of course, but that desperate feeling. So they're in acute renal failure. Again, almost like domoic acid. If we get them in early, antibiotics are excellent for curing this if it's not complicated, if it's not chronic. But leptospirosis is an infectious disease. These guys, cute cat, cute Virginia opossum, we're seeing more and more evidence of protozoan infections in our patients. Toxoplasmosis is the disease that any woman who's pregnant will hear about as they are cautioned to be careful around cats and around cat litter because the pathogen is the oocysts of the pathogen are passed in feces of cats. Likewise, sarcocystis is a protozoan pathogen of the Virginia opossum. These things get into wastewater, they get into the ocean, they get consumed by bivalves. Those bivalves get consumed by small animals, fish, etc., that ultimately get up into the food chain. And the oocysts of toxoplasmosis, for instance, are extraordinarily resistant and hardy and can stay around for quite some time. Feral cats, huge problem. Toxoplasmosis, a huge problem in Hawaiian monk seals, which we were just talking about. So some of these become really complicated problems to fix. But we're on the front line and we see these things, and we, emerging diseases right now, getting to the so what part of those three questions. We are one of those organizations, thankfully, that has our eyes open, that is watching what's coming in and correlating that disease with what's going on in the wild and sharing that information with others. We've always been interested in whales as well as seals and sea lions, dolphins, whales, porpoises, seals and sea lions, and yet only recently have built out with some significance our cetacean field work. So that has us doing work like characterizing the return of harbor porpoises to San Francisco Bay. Harbor porpoises were not in San Francisco Bay just a couple of decades ago, and have returned with consistency, and can be watched from the Golden Gate Bridge. Amazing to look down, see the incoming tide and the animals feeding right there inside of the bridge. Bottlenose dolphins are coming up farther and farther north, spending more and more time in our waters. Humpback whales are pausing. Gray whales are pausing in San Francisco Bay and feeding in San Francisco Bay, which we did not used to see. These things sound delightful, and yet they're triggered by things that are maybe not so delightful. Why is this gray whale that never used to need to come in San Francisco Bay as a rest stop or as a feeding stand now doing so? What did it not get many months ago when it was up in the Arctic before it did its migration down south? These are the kind of questions we're asking, all the while cataloging the animals that are in our care and working to ensure that the harms that are in their way in a busy harbor are mitigated. So working with colleagues to put in systems that alert cargo vessels to the presence of whales to encourage them to slow down and avoid ship strikes. As I mentioned earlier, working with fishing communities to ensure that we're not that we're minimizing the impact of fishing gear on the risk of entangling animals, but also just really interested in the biology of what is going on with the behavioral ecology, I guess you would say, of the animals utilizing this bay in a way that they didn't used to. We have an active endangered whale response project where we're getting the individuals. This is our model, is where we were building towards getting the individuals who are doing the research of presence, absence, behavior, monitoring, tracking, cataloging these whales on the water in San Francisco Bay and in Monterey Bay, to also be the very ones that if they see an entangled whale, to kind of virtually put the siren on the boat and go into ambulance mode and be about getting a safe and effective disentanglement performed. A whole lot there. Each one of these slides could be a talk. Climate change. When we think about ocean-dwelling animals and we think of marine mammals and we think of this west coast of ours, we think about prey availability. We think about habitat disruption. We think about range change. I talked about those pesky bottlenose dolphins showing up. Storm intensity. If you're a young elephant seal newborn this year, that's happening right now, just as these storms are coming in. And some of these storms are getting more and more intense. Infectious diseases, the influence of heavy storm runoff. Like, just think about what got pushed out in San Diego County yesterday with that epic part of that storm that swept through there. Deep dive, if you will, no pun intended, on warming water temperatures. 2015 was referenced as a year we had 1,800 patients in our care, and that was in large part because of water temperature. There was a situation in Southern California off the LA coast around the Channel Islands, disaffectionately known as the blob by the reporters. That became its nickname, a warm blob of water sitting around Channel Islands. If you're a sea lion, you give birth to pups. most of you do on the Channel Islands, and those pups are with you for months. They're dependent on mom for their nutrition. Mom is dependent on a healthy fishery for her nutrition. She's having to swim farther and farther to find the fish that she likes, that like cold water, who have moved away from those islands to find colder water because of this warm blob. So she's spending more and more calories on every fishing foray, coming back, not meeting her own nutritional requirements, not able to nurse and fulfill the requirements of her dependent pup. Those pups ended up being orphaned effectively, coming ashore on the mainland in droves. There was it was estimated that there were 3,500 orphan pups that year up and down the West Coast. Serious, significant situations, not static, not this is the new normal, not a linear step from colder waters to warmer waters still, right? Things are fluctuating and dynamic, and it keeps us on our toes and not taking anything for granted. But that's one of the manifestations of warming water temperatures that we see in an example around California sea lions. Likewise, sea level rise. You'll likely have seen it. I don't remember. It was during the pandemic. Maybe it was 2021. A small islet in the Pacific disappeared during that time. Sea level rise is a real thing, and it is exacerbated by stormy seasons like we see. These little elephant seal pups that are born out, we were talking before this started, we've got a webcam out at Chimney Rock and Point Reyes. Go to our website, marinemammalcenter.org, and you can find your way there. But you can see these adorable, fascinating little elephant seal pups literally being born, but they're right there at the coast, and these increasing high tides and increasing intensity of them and number of them of remarkable proportions are certainly going to be taking pups out to sea, and those are not pups that can manage that, and they will be lost. So in Hawaii, you've got animals whose habitat is being lost, and the potential for traditional or historic birthing sites for them are being lost. And on our coast as well, you're seeing impacts of it. We think back to that education ladder that I showed you earlier. We're doing what we can to teach about climate change, but we're also a part of the community of teachers. So it's a bit of an amplification of things, right? You can have a classroom of 30 folks, or you can have a classroom of 30 students, or you can have a classroom of 30 teachers. And with that classroom of 30 teachers, reach so many more. That's a silly kind of example, but that's our thinking. How do we reach those that can have the most amplified effect? So doing things the Marine Mammal Center, like overseeing Climate Literacy Collaborative, being the fiscal sponsor for the National Network for Ocean and Climate Change Interpretation, which is, and it is affectionately, not disaffectionately nicknamed NOKI. We are engaging tens of thousands of visitors and students and train 1,000 professionals each year on climate change messaging. And if I had $1 to spend on this, I'd put it on training those 1,000 professionals, right? You're going to get a bigger bang for that $1. So this is what it's all about, right? At the end of the day, if we're not only reaching, if we are only reaching people with cool stories of science, maybe sad, maybe hard stories of science, of what we're seeing in animals and what they're facing out in the ocean, that's important, that's valuable. But if we can get people to own that, to see their own role in it, and this is hard, I don't mean to make it sound trite or easy, but to get them to realize that their individual behavior, their collective behavior, their legislative behavior, and more is what it's going to take to turn around some of the really dire situations that we're seeing. So in answer to that question, behavior change ahead, yeah, because if not, it's moot, right? So that didn't sound it, but we're an optimistic bunch. We wouldn't be doing this work if we didn't not only care, but think that we can make a difference. And so we're turning not away from all the work we've done for 50 years, but on top of the work that we've done for 50 years towards being clever about social science, being clever about behavioral science, thinking about what we might do in Hawaii, for example, where you likely saw crazy videos coming out a year or so ago. If a name Rocky for Hawaiian monk seal rings a bell, there was a woman who was swimming way too close to Rocky as Rocky was protecting her pup just off of Waikiki Beach. How do we get people to understand in an island community there where there are residents and tourists, where there are native Hawaiians, where there are imported Hawaiians who feel native, and all of whom have different value systems, all of whom have different historical narratives as to what the relationship is between Hawaiian monk seals and themselves. How do you communicate to them? There, you go from island to island, community to community, beach to beach, and you see different signage, different wording, different ways of people imploring people to respect the wildlife. We'd like to invest in doing something, a sophisticated study of what will work, what is something that can be used that is common, at least in the messaging as it's received, if not in the delivery mechanism. So a lot of cool social science ahead in that regard. I'm going to end on this one. I'm coming up on 8 o'clock, I realize, and I'm almost done. 50 years of work that, if you can't tell, I and others here are really proud of, right? We've really, and in our community writ large, done an amazing job of understanding how to medically diagnose and treat the patients that come into our care. One of the things that has lagged, I would argue, and others around me, it's not my idea, is the behavioral care, the cognitive care, the mental stimulation that we provide an animal. You saw the images earlier of animals sitting on the lip of a pool. That's their home for weeks, sometimes a few short months, but months. And in the case of a harbor seal, for instance, they might come into us at 2 or 3 days of age. If they're in the wild, every one of those days is like a new and different master's class in staying alive in the wild, earning your keep in the wild, navigating storms in the wild, right? Here, there's room service and there's phenomenal medical care, but you're not working for your food, you're not evading predators, you're not doing anything. And this is when, like most mammals, right, youngsters are just, their brains are developed and wired to learn and take it in. And so we've taken this on seriously. We have a colleague we're working with who is in a PhD program at UC Davis, who's studying behavioral enrichment and trying to document what the impacts are on patients in our care of being presented with environmental enrichment or not. Two buzzwords or buzz phrase put together, environmental enrichment. Really, it is tools or devices that are used to stimulate activity and or cognitive skill development. So imagine, well, this little car wash strips and a float here, just breaking up the visual tactile environment in the water. But we've developed some cool things like little PVC boxes that are covered with fake rocks that have a lid that can only be opened by a seal by being underwater, holding its breath, working, using its nose and or its flippers to flip the lid up to find a frozen fish inside. That sounds really simplistic, and yet with videos trained on these things, we can look at activity budgets over time and determine how much time an animal is active throughout the day versus not, and infer from that you know, a steadier and more dynamic rate of mental development and physical development. So just preliminary findings, this is dated now, but we found that the use of these reduce stereotypical behaviors, doing the same thing over and over, just repetitive boredom behavior. We found that more time spent underwater was had between enrichment and control groups. We saw a strong relationship between the interaction with enrichment and a shortened number of days to free feeding, so becoming less dependent on us quickly, which is a good thing, and a strong relationship on the other side between the expression of stereotypical behavior and an increased number of days to free feeding. So I would assert that, 15 years from now, this is going to be part and parcel of what every marine mammal rehab facility is doing, and not just as a okay, let's just throw a ball in that pool kind of behavior, but as a really systematized and strategic and science-based program of behavioral enrichment. All right, this is the ad. If you're out on the beach, you heard me talk about these little elephant seals. Harbor seals are soon to be coming onto the beaches. This is a harbor seal up top. That's the umbilical stump right there. You don't have those very long after you're born, right? So just a few days that would be dried and falling off, scabbing off. This little guy definitely need of care. There's a harbor seal. Your job is not to go pick them up, right? Your job is to pick up the phone, give us a shout, take a photo from a distance, keep a distance, as you see these folks in this lower photo doing. If you can't find our number, 911 would have it. We can be found. 415-289 SEAL is the number to call. But seriously, the harbor seals specifically are prone to starting, right, and are startled easily, and will flush from a beach and just abandon their pup and try again next year. So we don't want to be that pup's parent. All right, so what is next? 50 years under our belt, what is next? I think back to how I opened this presentation with those two words, power and potency. And we are literally going through our programs, going through our process, thinking about our workflow as a system and where we can make it more powerful, more impactful, and more potent. What are those programs that have that power and potency duality, right? And what are the ones that are, yeah, that's nice, but it's not hitting the mark, and really want to be very mindful of what it is we're bringing into the mix in ocean conservation, and being continuing to stand on the shoulders of those that came before us, and emulating the great launch this organization had with smarts and humility and collaboration, and a real passion to get the job done. And all of that is going to be on the table in spades as we round the bend towards the next 50 years. Because holy smokes, the person in doing this 50 years from now is going to be telling a story that hopefully has a happy ending, but I think it's going to get a lot harder before it gets easier for sure. So I'm going to pause there. Do note my email address at the bottom. That goes directly to me. So if you have a question or follow-up thing you want to discuss, happy to field emails there as well. And we'll maybe drop my screen at this point and open it up for Q&A.
Yeah, thank you so much, Jeff. And to the folks who dropped some questions in the Q&A that are about specific, volunteer opportunities or potential employment opportunities and everything like that, I would say if you could just email Jeff directly, because we have a good amount of questions and don't think we could get to all of those right now. If that's okay with you, Jeff, if you wouldn't mind just kind of getting those one-off emails.
Yeah.
But yeah, so with that, I guess so one question that came in was about a recent story that someone had read about elephant seal mass deaths in Argentina. I don't know if that's something that you saw, and it seemed to have been due to avian flu. Is there any sign of that in California?
Had a really sobering discussion today. A few of our team members were on a call with UC Davis, among others, folks, just exactly about this. What is going on globally? What do we need to be watching for? A large number of elephant seals died from the bird flu, and largely pups. It's being moved around globally by bird populations, and we have seen a couple of cases some months ago now, up in Washington State. We're on the lookout. COVID, if nothing else, has taught us all to be on the lookout and to sample and to bank away samples to be able to do retrospective studies if we need to. And just 3 hours ago, 5 hours ago, sitting right here, it was a discussion amongst the veterinarians and the pathologists about not manifesting hysteria by any means, right? But we got to be on guard. We got to be ready. We got to be ready in Hawaii as well, as these migratory birds are moving north and south, right, depending on the season. And so this is going to be moving for some time to come.
Makes sense. Yeah, well, yeah, hopefully that's contained. And then I guess kind of back to your practices. Well, where do you guys source the 10,000 pounds of food every year for your animals?
Yeah, we work with a company called North Bay Meat Company up in Sonoma County, and are guided by the uh, the mainstay shops like the Monterey Bay Aquarium, Seafood Watch, and others to inform both the seafood purveyors and the folks they work with to make sure that we're taking from sources that are sustainable.
Makes sense. And then kind of back towards some of the diseases that you were saying, is there a way to have you guys found a way to trace the cancers that you were talking about back to like specific source by location or by specific chemicals, or is it just kind of more throughout like disseminated throughout the waterways and oceans?
Yeah, the location is an interesting question because the California sea lions, as I mentioned, most of them are born in Southern California off the coast of Los Angeles County, and in Channel Islands. And 50-ish years ago, 60-ish years ago, I guess now, there was a vast dumping of 55-gallon drums of DDT and the like, into the Pacific Ocean. The ocean was just seen in a very different way at that time. And the correlation of our patients and that location is not necessarily a smoking gun, but is pretty incriminating. So we've got the late Senator Feinstein had a keen interest in this. Congressman Ted Lieu in Southern California is keenly interested in this as well, and trying to ascertain what can we do? They care about sea lions, I know, but their interest is, holy smokes, we're all dining on seafood from these waters as well. We don't eat fish at every meal, likely, but these sea lions do, and look what's happening to them. So it's not just a cautionary tale for seals and sea lions, but a situation of interest for public health officials in human medicine as well.
Makes sense. And then on a sad note, how often are you guys forced to euthanize animals that you come across to put them out of their misery? Is that pretty often, or is that more of a rare occurrence?
Yeah, with this context, I'll offer you the answer to that. If you're a seal or a sea lion, you would make an excellent employee because you would never call in sick. You would just fake it as long as you could. And then when you start to manifest illness, you're so sick that you're seriously ill. And that's when they come to our attention. So, kind of by definition, they're behind the eight ball when they come in. So, if you look at a population of animals like that, it's something we're mighty proud of, that about 50% of the animals that we care for get back out into the wild. Well, about 50% die in our care. Um, those animals that die in our care, every one of them, typically, unless we're just really volume overloaded, every one of them receives a complete postmortem examination, a necropsy, as we refer to it with animals. And in that, we're determining what that illness was. We're banking away tissues, like I mentioned earlier. We are also generating data that allows us to step back and at the end of the year say, holy smokes, look what happened with leptospirosis last year. How does that compare to the last 4 years, the last 10 years? Look what's happening with domoic acid, whatever it might be. And so there's huge learning in that loss of life, but people don't get into veterinary medicine because they don't like animals, right? And so for everyone, whether vet tech, or just office staff in accounting, everyone cares about these guys, and so it's hard. It's hard decisions sometimes to make, but often the right thing to do to euthanize animals.
Absolutely. And I think that's it from the Q&A. But yeah, thank you so much for taking the time, Susan. I don't know if you have any closing remarks or anything, but that was amazing, and really appreciate you walking through everything.
That's been my pleasure.
Yeah, it was just so many, as you said, you could we could have a presentation solely on so many of the topics that you touched on, Jeff. My mind is just bubbling over right now with so much. I don't know. I just want to say I love that part on the behavioral enrichment, you know. I
Ah,
mean, because
excellent.
these are sentient animals and they're
Right.
learning, like teach, you know, they're small children learning. And yeah, anyway, thank you. I just, it was really rich,
Well, thank
really
you.
rich.
Thank you for having me. We are open 4 days a week, Fridays, Saturdays, Sundays, and Mondays. We encourage people to make reservations, not because there's a fee, there is no fee, but just to meter traffic. That was when we thought everyone was going to rush back in, that we'd need something like that. I don't think it's really that is the case, but go to our website. You can sign up to come in. There is self-guided tours. There are, for a nominal fee, there's a tour that one can be a part of that's led. But we love to tell our story, and it's a very visual story. We're coming into the season where little elephant seals are about to start coming in February, followed by the harbor seals in April and May, followed by the California sea lion pups in June. It's very much a story of neonatal care for the first 6 months of the year. So an excellent time to visit if you haven't. Do consider volunteering if you've got the time. You needn't have any animal experience. We'll give you all the training you would need. We have animal facing, people facing, retail facing, and other facing volunteer opportunities. So
How often do you do volunteer training? Is that on a schedule or?
I don't know if it is I don't know if it's set like metronomically every 2 months or something, but it is often enough. So you shouldn't have to wait too long if you have an interest in pursuing that.
Well, just fantastic reception to your talk, and you're a hero to many.
Oh my gosh, that's nice. I haven't been able to read any of this.
We'll get the chat to you, so you'll have a
Plenty of
record.
fan mail to go through.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Got to give a shout out to Cecilia, though. I just saw that.
Cecilia Boehm.
Yes.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Cool.
All right. Well, again, Jeff, thank you so much. All the best in this momentous year of 50 years
2025 will be 50. Yeah.
or 2025 coming
We're
into.
cheating. We're celebrating early.
I think it's important. So,
Yeah.
okay. Well, we'd like to have you back. So,
Thank you. Be happy to come back.
okay.
Wade,
Thanks,
Susan, thank you very
everyone.
much.
We'll see you all soon. Bye-bye.